Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Was Knucklehead Ninja Girl Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. It hadn't been long since he had awoken. The day was bright, making the hospital's white walls even whiter. It wasn't long before he wanted to get out of here. Bedpans clattered as he stumbled unsteadily into one of the hospital's gurneys. Naruto hastily scrambled for the nearest hole in the wall. He hadn't meant to stumble into the cart, but something was off about his body. It made him trip at the worst possible moment. Peering out from around the corner, he grinned at seeing the halo of light that surrounded the front door. Free. That was when the receptionist hung up the phone. Cupping her hands to her mouth, she drew in a deep breath. Oh no. Security. Naruto stopped running and nearly smacked himself across the forehead. Wasn't he a ninja? Ducking around a corner, he formed a few hand seals, changing his clothes from the hospital gown into his regular orange jumpsuit. Now they would think that he had been released already. Naruto struggled to break free of a burly man's grip. He had long given up on yelling at the two to let him go. No sound came out when he first tried to yell at them, and it wasn't about to get better anytime soon. Just as he rallied his resources for another try, he was released. Looks like him, but this isn't him, the burly man said to his partner. Hey, next time you leave the hospital, make sure you change out of those clothes. Otherwise mistakes like this happen. The two men walked away, killing intent leaking into the air as they continued the hunt for their prey. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. His henge had worked, they hadn't recognized him. It felt like there was something wrong with that last thought. But before he could figure out what, his stomach growled loudly, reminding him of why he had escaped from the hospital in the first place. Nothing was going to stop him now. Naruto. He froze and turned. Sakura-chan, he shouted. Or tried to. His parched throat felt like it was sealed shut and what came out was a moan. She came up to him and froze. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else. Not able to talk, the best he could do was nod, trying to convey without words, Sakura-chan, it is me. Well then, how awkward, Sakura commented as she looked to the side, refusing to meet his gaze. Sakura-chan, I missed you. He wanted to shout. He waved his arms wildly in frustration. When Sakura-chan reared back from him, he paused. Was he that hideous? He took a step forward, and she took a step back. He charged forward. If he couldn't talk, then he had to show his devotion with a hug. But no matter how fast he ran, she always seemed to be one step ahead. The chase ended when he slipped on a peanut shell and a plank of wood struck him upside the head. Ow. Gah. Are you okay? I didn't mean to. Sakura whispered before she fearfully looked both ways. Her gaze returned to him. It's just, your actions reminded me of a certain idiotic teammate of mine. Unless it's that stupid technique of his, he even messes up the henges, she said as she hid behind her back. Not that your henge is bad, of course, she added. He could only groan in response, but inside he was crying. She called him an idiot. Wait, his henges. Before he could ask, a feeling of surprise washed over him, soon to be replaced by contentment as he felt her hand lightly touch his scalp. All too soon, the luxurious treatment ended and Sakura hastily jumped back. Okay, I promise that I won't tell the hospital where you are. So stop chasing me. She hastily looked both ways again with a worried look on her face before she stood in her spot for a moment. She finally seemed to come to a decision as she searched through her purse. She pulled out a bandage. Sorry, she said as she bowed to him. Naruto dimly watched as she dropped the lightweight first aid tool and ran off. She paused at the entrance of the alley to glance at him one last time. Sakura-chan, he finally managed to rasp out, but she was gone by then. By the time he left the alley, His head still throbbing and a band-aid stuck upon the growing bump, Sakura-chan was nowhere to be seen. He hadn't traveled far when he suddenly found himself grabbed from behind and pulled into another alleyway. Ola Moen, a low voice said in an odd tone of voice. Naruto tried to turn his head, only to see a familiar orange book. It seemed like the man holding him wanted to act out what was in the book. The haze that had been following him since he had woken up cleared with that realization. Kakashi-sensei. That's sick, he tried to scream. But only a silent scream left his open mouth as he desperately tried to break out of his sensei's grip. After stomping on the perverted bastard's foot and then kicking him in the nuts, Naruto scrambled out of the alleyway, leaving the not-quite-dying man to the mercy of the rats. Only one person saw the pained man get up and wink towards the sky before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Standing high on the roof, a smile formed beneath the cloth covering his face. Kakashi turned, his eyes leaving his charge as he scanned the nearby crowd for Shizune. He spotted her soon enough, she was leaving the area in the opposite direction. He couldn't see her lips as her back was turned to him, but he could easily guess that an irritated, Naruto-kun, was running through her head. Naruto was safe for now. He pulled out his orange book and turned around, preparing to leave. That was when someone grabbed him from behind. Where is that brat? Operator poof operator. Kakashi, you bastard. Tsunade cursed. He could feel his intelligence slipping little by little. He needed food. Naruto stumbled and fell again and a vague sense of anger rose within him. Damn it, he was so hungry he was becoming clumsy. He tried, but he couldn't get up. Feeling weak. A curtain of blackness descended upon him. Tsunade stared at the rotten vegetables that peppered the window of a storefront. The store owner was confronting the vegetable stand owner from across the street. This is the last time you're throwing your worthless goods at my store, she growled as she held the man against the side of his stall. I was throwing them at that brat. It's not my fault that your windows were in the way. The stand owner gasped out as he struggled to break out of her grip. That excuse again, she growled as she tightened her grip. When you hit my customers, you used that excuse. When you destroyed my windows, you used that excuse. When you pelted me, you used that excuse. It's always that excuse. The young man was fearing for his life. Why, you were there. You saw how he wasn't running away like he usually does. That means you made a dummy that you could set up and use as an excuse to throw things at my store. She threw him to the floor and stepped on him. Where is it? She coldly asked. That's crazy. Now what self-respecting woman would like to be called crazy to their face? Not this one. And she bent down and hauled him up once again. No number. The man pleaded desperately, trying to save his bacon. You saw him leave. He went that way. The vegetable stand owner said as one of his hands let go of the arm suspending him and pointed in a direction. Where is it? The woman demanded again, her face an angry purple. Someone help me. SLRP. Naruto woke up to find ramen noodles within his mouth and a half-eaten bowl in front of him. He quickly finished up the rest of the bowl before looking around. He recognized this place. Hey, old man, how'd I get here? He demanded, his voice now much better now that he had drunken something to clear out the dryness from his throat. Who are you? The ramen stand owner immediately demanded in a gruff tone, a guarded tone in his voice. Huh. Naruto looked up, flashed the old man a sunny grin and a thumbs up. It was a good joke. One worthy of the great Naruto Uzumaki. The grin slowly left his face when there was no change in the other man's expression. The old man really wasn't joking, was he? Eating here for years, he had learned to recognize some of the ramen stand owner's body language. And it looked like the old man was getting close to throwing him out. It's me, Uzumaki. Naruto. A loud shattering sound from the right broke the silence. A hurried sorry came soon after. The sound of sweeping and the sound of porcelain clinking together as they were collected in a dustpan filled the background as silence descended once again. Moments later, Ayame-chan turned around. Naruto. She came up to him and Naruto had a damp rag wiping his face. It was soon removed and a hand rubbed against his cheek. It looked like the ramen girl hadn't found what she was looking for, because he yelped when a sharp stinging pain filled his cheek moments later. The ramen girl quickly let go with an apologetic look on her face. What was that for? He demanded as he rubbed his mouth from the pinch that she had just given me. Where are your birthmarks? Huh. A bowl clanked down in front of him before the girl could reply. Naruto. The ramen stand owner said before he started laughing gruffly. Sorry about that. Didn't recognize you with that new look. Here. On the house. As an apology for our lack of manners. Naruto was about to demand what was going on when his eyes fell on the steaming bowl of tasty goodness. Maybe later. Can't let good food go to waste, and ramen was best when it was hot. And one bowl became two. And two became four. And when he continued without stopping, any traces of hesitation disappeared from the eyes of the two behind the counter. So how did I get here anyway? Naruto asked again, pausing for a moment from his eating spree to ask a question that had been bothering him. You walked here, Ayame-chan said as she dried her hands. She had finished washing the bowls. I did. Naruto struggled to remember, but nothing was coming up. How come I don't remember? You didn't look too good when you came in, boy. Gave us quite a fright when you showed up covered in rotten vegetables, grunting and moaning as if you were in pain. The ramen stand owner remarked. Ayame was the one that came up with the idea that maybe you wanted something to eat. Naruto gave a gigantic grin. Oh, thanks Ayame-chan. He dug in again. Dash. And just like that, the next two bowls disappeared as they were devoured with gusto. Naruto was just working on his seventh bowl when he felt a hand land on his shoulder. Naruto slurped up his bite before looking curiously up at the ramen stand owner. Naruto, we've known each other a long time. Quote? Naruto's eyes flickered to the ramen girl. It looked like he wasn't the only one confused. So please don't think ill of me when I say this. The other two stared at the old man, wondering what he was going to say. You look like a girl. What? Daddy, have you no tact? Thankfully, the situation couldn't become more awkward because someone came in at that moment and took a seat at the counter. One small chicken ramen, please. How could you say that? I don't look like a girl. Naruto cried at the same time. Silence descended upon the stand. Hey brat, if you're going to escape from the hospital, make sure you get rid of the gown that you're wearing first. I didn't escape, you old hag. Naruto quickly denied. His eyes bugged out when he realized what he had just said. He turned to the busty blonde sitting right next to him. How had they found him so quickly? Ordinarily, I would make sure you would never call me that again. However, there is a reason why you were in the hospital. Tsunade calmly said as she tapped her fingers on the counter. She finally turned to the ones behind the counter. What are you two doing? She finally asked. Hokage-sama. The ramen stand owner and his daughter bowed, getting over their surprise. They immediately set to work. Crap. Naruto cried out as he turned and grabbed his bowl before preparing to jump off of his stool. Without even turning around, Tsunade had a hand on the collar of his shirt. I think it's time we went for a walk. Now that you're awake, it's time for you to hear the news. No, I'm not done here yet. Naruto cried out before he firmly grabbed hold of the stool to show his resolve. He had forgotten that the ramen stand's stools weren't bolted down. A fact that he was reminded of when he found himself being lifted into the air, the stool going with him. And then gravity took over when the hand holding him up in the air released him. The stool landed first, on one leg. Tipped precariously, Naruto only had time to yell before the stool fell over, taking him with it. Dash. Tsunade sat down and stretched. You know what? Forget it. I'll tell you right here. She turned to the ramen stand owner. Get me some sake to go with that ramen. She lazily added before her hand reached out and grabbed the annoying brat, preventing another escape attempt. The red-faced man hurried to comply with her wishes. Tsunade turned toward Naruto, a grim look on her face. And now then. The quiet afternoon was shattered by a loud liar. The startled birds immediately jumped from the trees. It was silent for a brief moment and the birds were considering returning to their spots. Quote. You accuse. Lying. Ye hey. What are you doing? Stop. Let go. A loud ripping sound filled the air. Shut up and look, brat. Aieee. Kai. 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 The birds left. Stop calling me that. The white-haired pervert shouted at the girl in the hospital bed. Huh. A confused blonde intelligently replied as she fumbled awake. It took her a moment to see who was responsible for the sudden noise. Afterwards, she couldn't help but pull the covers up further. Ero Senin. What are you talking about? She crankily shouted, upset at the old man for interrupting her nap. He didn't rise to her bait. His student's motion to hide had interested him. Oh, what could you possibly be hiding under the blankets? He asked as he took a corner of the thin blanket. No. Stay back. Naruto shouted in fear. It was in vain as the pervert's grinning head seemed to float closer. Not only that, but she seemed to be losing her grip on the blanket. There was a pop and a small cloud of smoke which quickly faded away. Naruto stood a few feet away from the bed, wearing a very thin hospital gown. Her arm was extended, indicating that she had just punched something. It was apparent that Jiraiya was unhurt. The same couldn't be said about his Bunshin, but they were supposed to be sacrificable anyway. The old pervert suddenly stopped debating the morality of making sacrificable doubles to laugh uproariously. Ha ha ha. I don't believe it. You're flatter than Tsunade Haim used to. He hadn't been able to finish since a clipboard chose that moment to slam into his face with enough force to shatter apart. There was a crash as Jiraiya slammed hard into a wall. Gravity took over, pulling the old pervert from the new indent on the wall and onto the floor. He was unconscious. Always a pervert, the blonde Hokage huffed as she held the splintered halves of the clipboard. She turned to look at the girl that was standing out of bed. And you're supposed to be in bed, the Hokage ordered. The blonde girl made no move to follow the Hokage's demand. Before Tsunade made her irritation known through her fist, she noticed that Naruto was gaping at her with an expression that seemed to say that everything had become clear now. Naruto. Nay, Tsunade Basen, it's genjutsu that makes your chest that large, right? The air turned downright hostile. Several rooms down, a machine started to dance as it tried to report that the patient was in serious trouble, but the doctors and nurses nearby were frozen in place by a very terrifying aura. You brat. The Hokage roared as she stood to full height. Naruto cowered in her spot, certain that this was the end of her life. A sharp pain suddenly blossomed at her forehead. Opening her eyes and looking upwards, she saw that Tsunade had her finger extended and poking her there lightly. You're lucky, brat. If you weren't a patient, I wouldn't have hesitated to send you after the pervert, Tsunade said with a grin. A glare took over. However, if I catch wind that you've become a pervert yourself, girl or not, I won't hesitate to end your life. Now get into bed. Tsunade had barely finished her statement when she found the girl hiding under the covers. She leaned over the bed to check on the girl's condition. Brat, came a cough from behind her. The girl stopped staring out the window at the nice weather outside to see who was speaking. Ero Senin. The blonde girl suddenly shrieked as she pulled the blanket over herself once again. Stop calling me that, brat, the man growled. Naruto took his growl the wrong way. Eek. Go away, pervert, she cried as she gathered more of the oversized hospital blanket around her body. Now look here, brat, I'm not just a pervert. You came to stare at me, didn't you pervert? Jiraiya's jaw dropped. Super per what? No. I feel dirty. Naruto sobbed loudly. Robbing cradles now, pervert? Asked a low menacing voice from behind. This was followed by the slow cracking of knuckles. Jiraiya slowly turned around with a resigned look on his face. Tsunade Haim. he asked as he managed a weak grin. Naruto stopped hiding to raise an arm and cheer. Get rid of him, Bachan. Crack. Glass blew outwards as a white-haired pervert went through a window and made a long arc toward the ground. It was dark and quiet out. A spry old man slowly snuck through the hospital utilizing every last peeping skill that he had to sneak around the guards and enter a normal-looking hospital room. He approached the lump under the covers and reached forward. You really want to die, don't you, pervert? Tsunade asked as she stood up from her seat, a hospital bed hidden behind the door. Naruto was quietly sleeping upon the aforementioned bed. Confused, Jiraiya ripped off the blanket. A tarred and feathered old man hung helplessly from the front of the hospital building the next day. A sign on his back saying, "No perverts allowed." And no, Tsunade didn't strip her old teammate naked, the hospital was full enough as it was. The old man was pissed. All he wanted to do was ask the brat whether she wanted to go on a 3-year training trip. He jumped through the broken window. Pervert, came a loud shout. Screw it, he thought as he found himself making a hole in the wall this time as he unwillingly flew out of the hospital once again. Naruto. Naruto tensed slightly, fully prepared to call for help. She slowly looked up from the manga that she was reading to see who was speaking. She called loudly, "All right. Ah, Sakura-chan," she greeted. Then her face fell. "I'm sorry that I couldn't bring Sasuke-tem back." "It's okay," Sakura said reassuringly as she took a seat at the foot of the hospital bed. Naruto's eyes narrowed before she vehemently shook her head. "No, it isn't. I gave Sakura-chan a promise and I never go back on my promise," she said as she stared at her covered feet. Her eyes suddenly seemed to glow as if they were on fire. "I'll bring Sasuke back for you, Sakura-chan. Just give me a little more time." Sakura smiled before she slowly shook her head. "No," the girl said. But Sakura-chan, don't you want Sasuke back?" Sakura wagged her finger at the blonde. "I mean, no, I won't let you go alone next time. I'll get stronger as well. When it comes time to bring Sasuke back, we will do it together." Naruto stared at her teammate for a moment before a large grin filled her face. "Yeah, we'll do it together." Naruto watched as Sakura left the room. She smiled as she looked back down at her manga. Naruto. Naruto fumbled briefly with her manga before she dove for her covers. She looked up again, the blankets shielding her from view. "Sakura-chan," she asked when she saw the pink-haired girl peering into her doorway. "Why is your voice different?" "Well, I woke up, and it was different," the girl laughed embarrassedly with a hand behind her head. Naruto ducked beneath the covers when Sakura suddenly glared at her. The sound of heavy footsteps caused her to peek out. Sakura-chan had left. Naruto looked quietly down at her comic book. She wanted to answer Sakura-chan. She really did. But she didn't know the answer herself. He. The blonde girl chuckled quietly as she snuck out of the hospital. It wasn't easy. Her new body was even shorter than before and had a different center of balance. In short, she was a tad clumsy and the fallen medical carts and disheveled towel racks made a lot of racket. As she peered around the corner, she did not notice the larger shadow sneak up from behind her. "Hey." The low chuckle was all the warning the short blonde had before she was caught in a tight headlock and struggling desperately to free herself. "Shouldn't you be back at the hospital, brat?" asked the Godime as she started to bodily drag the smaller girl back towards the medical center. Shouldn't you be back at the tower then? Bossin, the girl choked out. Meanwhile, Shizune was just entering the Hokage's chamber with an armful of papers. Upon seeing the empty Hokage's chair, she dropped the stack that she had been holding. Whump! Went the stack of papers as they landed on the floor and scattered. Tsunade-sama. Shizune shrieked as she started to shake. I suppose I could try letting you stay outside a bit longer, the fifth Hokage said as she promptly did an about-face and dragged her helpless captive towards the marketplace. Upon arriving, the two soon discovered a problem. What? The shorter one had shouted upon pulling herself free from the busty one's arm. You heard me, brat. No money equals no food or gambling. You, how did you gamble it all away when I only looked away for a minute? Naruto accused. Brat. There was the sound of a fist connecting with a spiky blonde head. Contrary to popular belief, Tsunade hadn't actually lost the money from gambling. Yes, she stopped in front of the pachinko parlor when Naruto wasn't looking, and she had taken a step towards the darkened room. But at the sight of Shizune dashing in and violently throwing patrons around as she searched for someone, she had nervously turned around and caught up with Naruto. Honestly, they were out of money because she hadn't brought many ryos along to begin with. But, we haven't had ramen yet. The girl complained. The fifth groaned before she glared pointedly at her shorter companion. Look, brat, if you don't shut up, I can drag you back to the hospital right now. Isn't Shizune Nichan working at the hospital at this time? The girl innocently asked. It's a risk that I'm willing to take, the fifth had replied through gritted teeth. Naruto wisely decided to stop complaining when she saw how serious the older blonde looked. There was a loud shout, drawing their attention to the right. They both stared at the sign. Third Annual Cooking Contest. Grand Prize. 1500 ryo. Second place. 500 ryo. Third place. 100 ryo. Anything goes. Elimination events begin at 1400. Finals start at 1700. Sponsored by the Akamichi clan. It occurred to Naruto that if ramen cost 3 ryo a bowl, that would be quite a lot of ramen. But ramen wasn't the only thing on her mind. For Tsunade, it meant more gambling money. The two entered the booth to apply. At table 5, we have the classic competition between mother and daughter. We're not related, the two shouted at the judge before they resumed glaring at each other. It was pure chance that the two were picked to compete against the other, however only one of them was going to be allowed to advance to the next elimination round. When the judge announced the topic, one of them started grinning wildly while the other gained a resigned look on her face. Instant ramen, you can easily guess who had what face. And so the cooking contestants were given a portable burner and a kettle full of water and the match began. Everything started smoothly at first. Water was heated and the kettles all started whistling at about the same time. With a sigh of happiness, Naruto finished pouring the water to the fill line. Pulling out a small egg timer that she usually carried with her for such situations, she set it for 3 minutes and set it down on the table next to her ramen. And then she swiftly grabbed her kettle, reared back, and swung it in a wide arc. There was a resounding clang as Naruto managed to deflect an incoming kettle towards another table. One thing to note is that these were not ordinary kettles. No, these contest kettles were designed to resist rusting, cracking, and denting. It's the dent resistance that was of interest. Some time ago, a construction worker had dropped one of these kettles from 3 stories up. It crashed into a concrete block with horrific force, splitting it in half. That's not all, however. That concrete block was responsible for holding a steel beam upright. Without its support, the beam fell over and landed on top of the kettle, crushing it. But I'm not finished yet. That beam was part of the primary foundation. As it fell over, it brought the entire frame down with it, so several beams weighing about a ton each crashed on top of the first beam, further flattening the kettle. When the noise finally died down, the construction company was forced to send several of its workers to the hospital as well as start over on the construction of the office building. The kettle responsible was finally unearthed sometime later. It was a bit dirty, but there wasn't a pockmark or a dent on its smooth exterior. To get this sort of durability, these kettles had walls which were thick and solid. In short, they were heavy. The rogue kettle, that Naruto had deflected a few paragraphs ago, bounced away and landed on a table off to the side. There was a loud crack as the table splintered and broke in half, spilling the ramen cups that had been resting on top and waiting for the 3 minutes to ready. There was a shout, and then the battle began in earnest. The goal was to sabotage your opponent's ramen cup. Those whose instant ramen remained unspoiled would advance to the final. There were a few restrictions in the contest, such as no killing or grievously wounding your opponent. Only physical attacks were allowed, although chakra could be used to enhance the attack. An important rule is that you were not allowed to directly attack ramen cups that did not belong to your opponent. It was, however, frowned upon but not illegal to indirectly hit ramen cups of other people that were not your opponent. Several nearby contestants shouted angrily as another miniature earthquake broke out. Luckily, Naruto had been prepared as she held her ramen cup aloft as the table that it was originally sitting on shook violently from Tsunade's attack. The shaking was far more than enough to spill ramen cups, as several of those that had been standing nearby started complaining to the judges about their disqualification. None of the opponents in this contest could match up to the destructive power of a Sannin. The second strongest cook in the tournament, however, was eliminated when he decided to take the offensive and left his cup unguarded for half a second. A stray rusty kunai took advantage of that moment to pierce the cup, staining the water inside a bloody brown. Back at Naruto and Tsunade's table, the younger blonde was doing a fairly good job defending her cup of instant ramen from the old lady. Forced on the defensive from the start, she fearlessly stared down every one of Tsunade's attacks, dodging many and countering a few. There was a tremendous boom as Tsunade created another earthquake. This one was powerful enough to have a crater and a fault line. In the aftermath of this attack, several of the contestants were on the ground moaning and groaning after the attack. The judges soon dispatched a messenger to summon a hospital team over to treat the injured. It would take a few minutes before the medics would arrive. However, none of the moaning and groaning contestants had more than minor injuries. All of them were lamenting over their loss. If the vibrations and sudden holes weren't enough to defend against this attack, the dust-filled air was definitely capable of contaminating the soup. In one stroke, Tsunade had succeeded in wiping out most of the remaining competitors. All that was left was her cup, Naruto's cup, and one other contestant's cup. An egg timer went off just as the dust had settled. It was the one that Naruto had set right after pouring the hot water. Moments later, her ramen cup was empty. It took her a few seconds of staring at Tsunade's smirking face before she realized what she had just done. Uttering a curse that was vile enough to surprise even the fifth, Naruto lunged for Tsunade's cup. She might have lost, but the rules encouraged active participation as long as time allowed. Bong! Time's up, shouted the judge as he hit the gong. Naruto dug her heels into the ground in a desperate attempt to stop her assault. She needn't have bothered. Just as she reached Tsunade's instant ramen cup, a haymaker caught her across the face and sent her flying into the middle of the bystanders. The judge looked around for a moment before raising the Hokage's hand. Seeing how there are no more competitors, the finals winner has already been decided. He walked up to the blonde Hokage and lifted her hand high into the air. The winner of this year's annual cooking contest is Tsunade-sama. Tsunade turned angrily towards the person who dared interrupt the judge, only to be greeted by the sight of a sea of pointing fingers. Behind the crowd, Shizune stood at the entrance to the tent. She was leading the team of medics from the hospital. There is a pile of papers in your office that require your immediate attention. But, I believe that the case cage is currently staying in a hotel and awaiting a moment of your time. Shizune. Team 8 has recently completed their mission and seek a moment of your time. Tsunade pulled her arm away and stepped out without another word. The judge was uncomfortably aware of the hostile looks in the crowd. The winner had just left without claiming her prize. That meant that first place was still available to give out. That meant he was going to continue the contest or else. He coughed once before standing up to announce, because the winner of the contest has forfeited and because there wasn't a clear runner-up, another preliminary will have to be held to determine the contestants who will enter the finals. I ask that you please wait while we set up the next preliminary. There was a resounding cheer from the crowd. Naruto shouted with her hand in a victory sign and a fierce grin on her face. There was sobbing behind her, and a quick look into the background showed her opponent on his knees crying beneath a black one-legged table. On top of the table was a nice steaming plate of dumplings standing on top of the remains of an egg timer, the remains of her opponent's culinary attempt, and also, the shredded remains of her opponent's pants. From here on out, I will not be the judge anymore. I leave this job to a more experienced group of taste testers. I will now announce the members of the panel, the group who will be responsible for judging the culinary creations produced in the final. We begin with more talking. Ah, she impatiently hopped up and down a few times before the sound of crying caught her attention. She glanced back at the crying man and chuckled slightly as the memory of the last half hour surfaced. It was a crazy and vicious fight. Her opponent had left to use the restroom halfway through the match. She caught him with his pants down. Yes, literally, but not like that. The poor guy was minding his business inside of the restroom when he was suddenly covered in flour and raw eggs. There was a loud roar from within and the man soon charged out. That was when Naruto leapt from the roof and struck him. Seriously, if you think a 12-year-old girl would be able to knock out a man 3 times her weight with only a single hit to the head. You'd be right. Naruto threw the dented frying pan aside and proceeded to drag the unconscious man back towards the cooking tent. From there, she batted her opponent's nicely steaming dumplings aside, poured her own into the steamer, and secured her place in the finals. As for why the man's pants were on the table, well, Naruto had met Anko on the way back to the tent. The two exchanged a few words before Naruto paled and ran. In her haste, she had forgotten her opponent's body. A bad thing to do since Anko had been on the prowl for fresh meat. The crazy Kunoichi glanced downwards. Naruto's opponent staggered in minutes before the contest's end, throwing what was left of his pants at the girl before collapsing to the ground and crying in his nice new dress suit. And finally, the newest member of the panel is Choji-san from the prestigious Akamichi clan. The preliminaries judge turned announcer finished. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. Rest assured, he may be young and a member of the clan who sponsored this contest, but Choji-san has years of culinary experience under his belt. In addition, though a member of his clan has reached the finals, his reverent respect for food will prevent him from making a biased decision. The murmuring quieted soon after that. After wiping some sweat from his brow, the announcer straightened up. In a few minutes, we will begin the finals. Will Aramen-san, Futada-san, and Akamichi-san step forward please? Upon hearing Aramen-san, Naruto stepped forward. Accompanying her were an average-looking woman with long black hair and a largish man in a chef's uniform. Will Aramen-san please step forward? The announcer repeated. Naruto looked confused but she took another step. I repeat, will Aramen-san please step forward, the finals are about to begin. Unable to take it anymore, Naruto stepped forward, grabbed the announcer's sleeve and shouted, I'm right here Baldy. The crowd became restless again. Kya, she's so cute. What a rude little girl. No wonder why we didn't see her, she's so short. How old is she? Where are her parents? I'm sorry little miss, the announcer apologized as he used his free hand to cover his hair. Naruto growled quietly in response. Little was bad enough. Miss was a death wish. Baldy stood up again. Ahem, the final topic for these 3 contestants will be. He paused to take a deep breath. Fried chicken. Puka clucked a few nearby fowl that had been wandering by. Puka. Feathers flew everywhere as the chickens desperately ran for it just as a group of butchers released their camouflage cloth, revealing their position and large gleaming knives. You will, of course, be provided with the freshest ingredients that money can buy, the announcer added, totally ignoring the frightful slaughter. Surprisingly, all of the chickens within a mile radius had managed to escape the bloodthirsty knives. And without the main ingredient, the contest topic had to be changed. Sitting in front of the panel were 3 bowls of noodle dishes. All 3 of the judges tentatively eyed the small bowl in front of them. They took a bite. "This is delicious," the first judge announced as he revealed an 8. "I agree. The rich broth and high quality of the noodles deserves a high score, 9. The score fell on the final judge, 4. The preliminaries judge turned announcer turned to the crowd to shout, "The final scores are as follows. Futada Aika has finished first with a score of..." "What?" Naruto outraged shriek filled the air, interrupting the announcer and catching everyone's attention. Choji calmly sat back and coolly regarded the irate girl as he prepared his explanation. "Indeed, this noodle bowl was delicious, but this flavor was only created because you used extremely high-quality ingredients. I don't know where you found such ingredients during the contest, but this is a cooking contest. We want to see your skill, not your wealth." Naruto was doing a credible impression of a fish out of water. "Are we agreed then?" Choji asked. "Over my dead body fatso. I used the ingredients that Baldy gave me," the irate girl raged as she pointed at the announcer. "Baldy?" the announcer asked aghast, fumbling with his hair again. "While the vegetables were fresh, I find it hard to believe that the rest of the ingredients could be used to create something like this," Choji maturely replied. However, the redness of his face indicated that he was steaming over the weight comment. "They can. Look," the girl shouted as she seized a small bowl and filled it with her cooking entry. She took a sip and frowned. "Needs a bit more salt," she mumbled quietly before she glared furiously at Choji, "but these noodles, I made them myself." Contestants were given a box of dried noodles, Choji replied as he pointed towards the judge. Naruto looked confused, as if that was news to her. The announcer thought about it for a moment before replying, "We ran out of noodles, so I gave her a bag of rice flour." "What?" Naruto and Choji both shouted in outrage. One because he made a false assumption, thus calling his skill into question. The other because she was being unfairly underestimated again. "I didn't think you knew what you were doing, so it was only logical to keep you occupied while the other 2 worked seriously. If it's any consolation, I was surprised when you turned in your own entry," the announcer shakily admitted. The crowd turned in Naruto's direction as they awaited her response in the 3-way ping-pong argument. If I may suggest," the second judge timidly said. "What?" the 3 shouted. "How about we ask this girl to make her soup again?" No sooner had he suggested this when. "Wud. ... A large open bag of flour landed in front of the surprised judges. Clang. ... It was immediately followed by a large cooking pan full of water. Thok. Assorted containers of seasoning. Thud. And a box of fresh vegetables. Fine. The girl shouted as she started to sprinkle oil onto the surface of the judge's table. "What technique?" someone shouted as Naruto expertly combined the flour and the water. She heaved the ball of dough into the air. "Is that the raking claws of the angry dragon? Didn't that technique disappear out when the last practitioner of the school of ramen combat died last year? How did he die again? I heard it was an accident." There were more gasps. "The trickling lotus leaves seasoning technique. Said to evenly spread the spices throughout a dish. When used with soups, it prevents the flavor from settling on the bottom, resulting in a balanced taste that is neither weak nor intense. Truly fearsome. How would this child know of such a technique? She must be a cooking prodigy." Naruto paused for a moment from embarrassment. She liked compliments, but these were weird. Trickling what technique? She was just spreading the spices with one hand while she stirred the pot with the other. She ladled out a small portion of the steaming soup into a small saucer to taste. "Uoa, is that the blazing kiss of the Sukyu? Shut up already," the blonde girl shouted as she reared back to throw the saucer at the offender. She paused for a moment to think about her actions before, with a humph, she returned to tasting her soup. After sprinkling a few more spices into the soup, she turned to the judges. "It's done," she shouted, ladling the soup out into the small bowls. The judges sampled the soup. "It's better than before." Agreed. I must apologize, Naru-san. I suppose it was possible to make such a great soup without high-quality ingredients. Choji quietly said, looking downcast. It's fine. Just fix the score, the girl cheerfully replied with a thumbs up. I'm afraid that we can't, came the announcer's voice from behind. Before the girl had a chance to respond, the announcer quickly shot out, ahem, sorry for the interruption. The winners are as follows. Futada Aika has finished first with a score of 24, Akamichi Taro takes second with 22, and Araman Naru takes last place with a score of 21. Huh? Naru dumbly asked. She turned around to argue. A brief gust blew through an empty tent. Disgusted, she hurled the 10 Ryo coins that she had suddenly found in her hand onto the ground and stomped out. Unnoticed, Choji watched the girl leave the tent through half-lidded, almost evil-looking, eyes. Bachan. Give me a hard one for once. Naruto whined from on top of the desk. Tsunade suddenly slammed her palm down, barely missing the girl, and cracking the desk in the process. Okay. Fine. Yes. She shouted, leaping up. A sinister grin appeared on the Hokage's face. But first. The younger blonde unwittingly said. Quote. Show me that you're good enough for one. If you can keep your identity a secret for a day, I may have a high-ranking mission available for you. However, if even one person discovers your identity beforehand, I'll have you in a dress and doing D-rank missions for a month. Have we got ourselves a deal? The look of apprehension quickly faded from the younger blonde's face. Hey, this'll be easy. She loudly proclaimed as she ran out of the room to hide in her apartment. With Naruto's departure, only two remained inside of the Hokage's office, Tsunade and Shizune. Well, three if Tun was included. Sitting at her desk, Tsunade reached forward and pulled out a small pile of mission requests. Most of them were C rank and up. She quickly rifled through them. Assassination in fire, espionage in cloud, assassination in earth. Naruto wasn't ready for any of these missions. Besides, she thought that Naruto would look cute in a dress. So she had to stack the deck in her favor somehow. Shizune, I have a sabotage mission of utmost importance, she said as she held up the data folder for the nin that she wanted assigned to the mission. The woman standing next to her sighed before carefully setting Tun on the ground. Konoha is just as energetic during the night as it is during the day. After all, it is a ninja village. It's not uncommon for nins to be wandering around at this time of night, going about their business as if the sun was still up and shining brightly. The camera pans slightly before zooming in on a young boy who was currently out wandering after dusk. It's a great night to be out, Akamaru. Kiba asked, looking upwards at his traveling companion for a response. It had been a few hours since Team 8 had been dismissed from the Hokage's office after submitting their report on a successful mission. The Inuzuka and his companion were now searching for something to do to pass the time. The small nin dog woofed a few times in response. Hey, I hear you. So how about that one? Kiba asked as he pointed to a shadow nearby. It was obviously an adult female, however the dark night and absence of street lamps on this road hid her features from view. Akamaru gave a short bark. It sounded like the dog was chortling. You don't have to rub it in, Kiba whined half-heartedly as the two continued onwards, forgetting about the woman in the process. His white companion gave another bark. Thanks, pal, Kiba said with a grin before he started to daydream about meeting a hot chick and wooing her with flowers and poetry. Akamaru suddenly whined loudly. Kiba quickly turned at the warning. It was too late as he suddenly found himself holding someone shorter than him. From the scent, he knew that he was holding onto someone of the opposite gender. How awkward. The two quickly separated, the girl pushing herself off with a half-hearted apology before she started walking away. The Inuzuka would have none of that though. Reaching over, he caught her arm and, hey, sorry about, he said casually. No prob, the blonde girl interrupted as she tugged on her trapped arm. No, I'll make it up to you. He released her arm so that he could put his hand to his chin. After a moment of thought, he smacked a fist into the palm of his hand. I know, he exuberantly said. He turned to the girl to reveal his idea, only to find that the spot next to him was quite empty. Kiba quickly looked around. He spotted her small form hurrying away towards a rundown part of Konoha. Hey! He shouted. The girl jumped slightly before she abandoned her fast walk and ran for it. Kiba immediately shot off after her. Luckily, Inuzukas were fast, so it took little effort for him to catch up. Akamaru growled slightly though. He was going to have words with his partner about the rough ride later. Hey wait, how about I buy you dinner? Kiba asked as he started running alongside the girl. He stopped as she disappeared again. But only because she stopped. Really? She asked when Kiba finally turned around to look behind him. After years of hunger, she wasn't one to turn down free food. Yep. Come on. I know this great sushi restaurant. Kiba said as he jogged over and tugged lightly on her arm. As he led her around, something started to bother him. You know, something about you seems familiar. What's your name? Call me Araman, came the confident reply. Araman. That's not your real name, is it? Kiba asked skeptically. Of course it is, dog boy. The girl next to him laughed. Akamaru swiveled around as the head he was riding on turned to the girl with narrowed eyes. Because it was dark out, she didn't notice. Dog boy. There aren't many that call me that. The suspicion in Kiba's comment was easy to pick out. She stalled, not knowing where dog boy was going with this. In fact, only one person that I know of actually calls me that to my face, and that is you. Wah! The two were passing under a streetlight when Kiba suddenly spun and seized the girl's shoulder to hold her still. Naruto. Under the dim light, it was possible to guess what she looked like during the day. Her hair seemed to reflect the blue glow of the street lamp. A light color, possibly blonde or pink. Bright eyes, too light to be black or brown colored. They could be blue or green. No whisker marks, odd. There were two girls that matched these descriptions, Ino and Sakura. This girl was neither, she was too short. The best answer was therefore the only one of their age group who had a special henge. The girl quickly stopped gaping in shock as she started to shake. No way. I mean, who's Naruto? She said as she pushed him away before she started gesturing wildly. Kiba chuckled. Yeah, you're the only one I know of who smells like weak old ramen. She appeared indignant. I do not. Yo. You're right. He took a whiff. You had ramen yesterday as well. You have the wrong guy, yo. She shouted angrily. You're right. Akamaru suddenly let out a bark. Akamaru says that you smell like a girl. Akamaru growled in response, but Kiba ignored his partner. I'm not a girl. Naruto abruptly shut her mouth as her face darkened from the blood rushing to her head. She turned and ran for it. She didn't get very far before she found herself in a headlock. Admit it, you're Naruto, Kiba demanded. Never. The girl loudly shouted from her leaned-over position as she used both of her hands to push against the arm looped around her neck in her desperate struggle to break free. So that's the way you want to do it? Kiba asked in an unimpressed tone. Her eyes widened. Kiba started to walk away with her head in the crook of his arm. Gawk. Naruto gasped as she stopped struggling and followed as best as she could. State your business. The guard at the gate demanded. Is Hinata in? Kiba asked before thrusting one of his shoulders upwards to get some blood flowing into it again. Incidentally, his struggling cargo also experienced a brief moment of airtime. Of course, what goes up must come down, and there was a, as her stomach landed on his shoulder again. Right afterwards the girl was beating ineffectually on his back with her bound hands as she struggled to yell through the duct tape. I believe she is, the guard replied, completely ignoring the spectacle in front of him. Can you go call her? I need to show her something, Kiba requested as he twitched in frustration. He threw the girl upwards again to get her to stop. Very well then, the guard said with a clipped nod before making a gesture to his partner. The other guard quickly disappeared. Kiba took that moment of free time to lower himself to the ground and shove the girl off of his shoulder. Sitting on her back to keep her down, he started to wait. Minutes later, Hinata appeared at the front gate. Kiba, she asked quietly. Hinata. Kiba greeted cheerfully. He turned to look at the bound girl next to him. I need your help with something. With that, he took a corner of the duct tape and pulled. Rip. Ow. The girl beneath him shrieked as her lips were almost pulled off. This is. Kiba started. Untie me, you bastard. Naruto vented angrily as she squirmed. Naruto. Kiba finished. No, I'm not. The girl vehemently denied. Yup. See, she claims that she isn't. Could you use your bloodline to see who's right? I think so, Hinata whispered before forming a seal and activating her bloodline. After staring intently at the violent girl beneath Kiba for a moment, Hinata's eyes widened as she let out a gasp. What is it? Kiba demanded from his teammate. That's not Naruto. No, not Naruto, Hinata said with a shaky laugh. Kiba's face fell. Oh, see, couldn't be Naruto. Naruto-kun is a guy and you are a girl. Maybe he had a sister. But he never said that he had one. But you are Naruto's sister, right? Hinata said in a flighty tone of voice as her eyes suddenly lost focus. At the other girl's desperate nod, Hinata continued. Hi, Naruto's sister, would you like some tea? Oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot. I hadn't anticipated any visitors. It will take some time to make the tea. Please come in anyway. Yes. When did Naruto-kun say that he will be over? Oh, I need to get dressed. One of the guards suddenly picked up the babbling white-eyed girl and carried her away. The other was glaring at Kiba with a less than friendly expression. You broke her. He reared up menacingly. I'm so going to enjoy this. Dodging a swipe, Kiba quickly seized a pair of legs and ran for it. In his desperate bid to find the truth, Kiba visited several more houses that night. Many of the people that he visited immediately slammed the door on his face. Others laughed for a brief moment before giving Kiba some pointers on where his prank had a problem. Undeterred by the long string of failures, Kiba had the girl in his arms as he bridal carried her to the next house. Akamaru had long since grown tired of riding on the boy's head, so he was now resting quietly inside of the Inuzuka's jacket. Gah! The girl shouted in frustration before she started to wave her arms wildly, incidentally smacking a white dog in the face. Her actions weren't hasty. By doing this, she fully intended on having her feet on the ground. She hadn't counted on being dropped, however. Pushing herself up, she spit out the mouthful of grass that she had just consumed before standing up. I can't take it anymore. Fine dog boy, you're right, I'm Naruto. The girl shouted angrily before dusting herself off and stomping home. After a little sleep, Naruto stepped into the Hokage's office a few hours later, bright-eyed and refreshed. I did it, Tsunade-bachan. No one knew that it was me. The girl cheered. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Oh, I have reports from all over claiming that they had seen you. Naruto sputtered for a moment. You can't prove anything. She shouted as she pointed at the older blonde. There was a snicker from behind her, and then a click. Moments later, more. Fine dog boy, you're right. I'm Naruto. Echoed throughout the room. Naruto whirled around to see Kiba standing behind her with a smug look on his face. You. Tsunade nodded sagely. I see. She looked upon her desk before reaching for a folder with a large D emblazoned on the front. That could have been anyone's voice. Naruto immediately shouted in her defense when she saw what the old hag was reaching. Kiba held up a picture of Naruto shouting at him. How do you know what I was saying at the time, dog boy? Naruto challenged. Click. A television set that was hidden in a corner of the room suddenly started displaying a movie of Naruto spitting out a mouthful of dirt before standing up and shouting, "Ah! I can't take it anymore. Fine dog boy, you're right. I'm Naruto." Naruto turned white upon seeing the embarrassing video. "Do you want me to bring in the witnesses?" Kiba asked innocently. Naruto looked away, unable to come up with a suitable defense. Tsunade started to laugh uproariously. "Not bad kid, completing a B-ranked mission all by yourself." Red started flooding her pale cheeks when she heard those words. "What?" she asked in a quiet voice. "Here's your pay kid, now get out of here and don't spend it in one place," Tsunade said as she handed a large packet to the Inuzuka before turning to the steaming X container. "This doesn't count. You told him in advance, Bachan." She shrieked in outrage. "Actually it does. I never said that I couldn't reveal your secret. But if it's bothering you so much," she paused for a moment, "when you admitted your identity to Kiba, several citizens were frightened awake by your loud shout." She held up a small stack of papers. "These are their complaints." Now, Tsunade pulled out a different folder with D clearly marked on the tab. "Are you going to keep your promise?" Naruto hung her head as she nodded and reluctantly stepped forward. "Oh," Tsunade said as she pulled the folder back. "Wait a moment." Naruto raised her head hopefully. Tsunade Bachan was feeling sorry for such a cruel deception and was going to give her a more exciting mission. "I almost forgot." This time the Hokage had a large maniacal grin on her face as she opened a drawer and pulled something out. Her jaw dropped. "Hell no, you old hag. You can't make me." The girl shrieked. Kiba returned home with a large grin on his face. He loved being a private detective. He flopped onto his bed and pulled a manga from off the floor. Just as he opened it, he heard a shout from the kitchen. "Kiba, for the last time, clean your room." Setting the small graphic novel down for a moment, he turned to the open door. "I'll do it later, Mom." Before he could start reading an enthralling tale about magic and dragon slaying, his mom appeared in the doorway. "I knew you were going to say that, so I hired a genin team to do it for you. I expect you to use the money that you earned this morning to pay for it." "What? I said I was going to do it. A team of genin wasn't expensive, but it was the principle of the matter." "Then turn the genin away and do it yourself," she responded in a no-nonsense tone. "I expect your room to be spotless when I get back in 2 hours," she warned as she walked away. Several moments later, Kiba heard the front door shut. Shrugging, Kiba picked up his book and began to read. Kiba was just getting to the good part when he heard a knock on the door. Sighing, he rolled off the bed and left his room to open the front door. In one swift twist, the door was unlocked. Kiba slowly reached for the knob. "Whoa!" he shouted in surprise as he jumped back when the door flew open. There, standing on the Inuzuka's front step, was Naruto. There, standing in front of him, was a red-faced blonde girl with a giant red bow on top of her head, and a French maid's outfit. He could almost see the steam pouring out of her ears. "You look." Kiba was at a loss for words. Naruto looked really cute in that getup. Especially with the angry pout on her face. But this interest in her was both disturbing and frightening. Akamaru was far less restrained in what he thought as he walked up to her, started sniffing around the girl's ankles. "Here," Naruto said through gritted teeth as she shoved something into his hands. It was a small scroll. There was a moment of silence as Kiba unrolled the scroll and began to read. Naruto shuffled uneasily for a moment. "Where's the payment?" she demanded. "Hang on," Kiba said as he continued to read. Just when the girl was about to burst, he looked up. "It says here that I'm not supposed to pay you until you finish your mission." "I did finish it. You got your stupid scroll right. Actually, your real mission is to clean my room," Kiba said with a straight face. "What? No, it isn't," the girl denied as she snatched the scroll from his hands and read it herself. She cursed before throwing the scroll down and stomping on it several times. "You're so damn lucky, dog boy. I'm not supposed to kill you until after I receive the payment." Where's your room? I'm not going to fail a mission just because of you. Kiba chuckled weakly, all thoughts of turning away the hired help cowering from the intense fire in the girl's eyes. Turning, he headed for his room. Oh God, Naruto said as she looked in. The floor wasn't even visible because of all of the scrolls, clothes and trash. Well then, good luck, Kiba said as he started to edge away, leaving Naruto to stare blankly at the mess. Just as he reached the corner, he turned to hear his door slam shut before the hallway was filled with the sound of heavy machinery and intense cursing. Fearing the worst, Kiba ran back to his room, only to discover that the door was locked. He finally stopped banging on his door. Whatever was going on in there was definitely drowning out his knocking. After several minutes of sitting in front of his door and imagining Naruto with a giant flamethrower torching his room, the noise suddenly disappeared and the door slowly opened. Kiba wasted no time looking in. He was shocked. Naruto, what the did you do to my room? She looked in with her closed-eyed expression for a moment before turning back. Cleaned it, yo. His room was worse than before. Now the list of people who couldn't walk around in there included him. Be serious. He shouted angrily at the girl. If you don't know how to clean, have a look at my sister's room or something. I'm going to the bookstore. I expect my room to be clean when I return. Kiba left right after that. He didn't notice Naruto sticking out her tongue and giving him a red eye behind his back. Half an hour later, Kiba returned with a small stack of comic books. Entering his room, the Inuzuka was prepared for almost everything but that. The bag in his hand fell from nerveless fingers and landed with a thump. Naruto turned to him for a brief moment before turning back to what she was working on. You're back. What the hell? Kiba shouted. Pretty good, huh? Naruto commented without turning around. There sitting in the middle of his room was a life-sized sculpture made from clothes. Kiba wouldn't have minded as much if the sculpture didn't look so much like him beaten and sprawled on the floor with Naruto standing over him posing victoriously. Shouldn't you be cleaning my room? He demanded. I'm done, yo. The girl said with a shrug as she started to piling some cloth to make a small akamaru. Kiba's face went to his hands. He didn't even need to look to know that his room was even messier than the second time. He looked anyway. Okay. He was positive he didn't own this many clothes. So where did the extra clothes come from? His question was soon answered when he saw something that looked like his sister's underwear. The front door clicked open and the Inuzuka heir started fearing for his life. Akamaru, the traitorous partner, was suspiciously absent. I'm home. Why does it smell like stale ramen in here? Hey mom, we're in here. Kiba shouted as he looked around desperately before moving to pick up a discarded food wrapper. Naruto watched with interest as her employer was soon gathering everything from the floor in one fell swoop and shoving them into the only hiding space available, the closet. Kiba must have had a hidden talent somewhere because, when his mom appeared moments later and looked around, she nodded and looked rather pleased. Before he could breathe a sigh of relief, he noticed a glint develop in her eye before she walked up to the closet and carefully slid it open. Surprisingly, everything inside was stacked in a tidy, orderly manner. Keep it like this, Kiba, she said as she walked out humming. Naruto suddenly seemed to remember something. Payment, she sternly demanded as she held out her hand. Urasai, I had to clean the room myself. Kiba shouted as he moved to throw the girl out. Omake. Ichi, what do you want, Naruto? Kiba tiredly asked a few days later. That last mission hadn't been an easy one. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she continued to lead him until they reached a rundown apartment complex. She didn't stop there. She continued pulling him up 3 flights of stairs before she unlocked the door and the two entered a living room. He gaped at the odd stains on the walls. It almost appeared that they used to spell out something. Before he could examine them, he found himself pulled towards another room. Look, Kiba, the girl shouted as she swept her arm around her. Was she showing off the room? Kiba could only look on in confusion. The girl then walked up to the closet and pulled it open. Wog! She cried as she was suddenly buried. A cry that was soon echoed by Kiba as the pile of junk soon covered him as well. It was early in the morning. Very, very early in the morning. So early in the morning that the sun wasn't out and only the patrolling nin were up at the time. So we need to wait a bit. A few hours later, a struggling Naruto was carried into the Hokage's tower where she was unceremoniously deposited on the floor. Both, the Anbu and Naruto gawked at the sleeping blonde woman for a moment before the Anbu turned around and headed for the door. Oi oi, shouldn't you wake her up? Naruto whispered quietly. The Anbu adopted a posture that seemed to say, "Do I look stupid?" before quickly disappearing in a shower of leaves. So it was up to Naruto to wake up the Hokage. Thankfully she had heard of a foolproof way to pull this off without dying. Unfortunately, she never found out that this was just a story told by the more experienced nin to the rather gullible recruits. Forming a familiar set of seals, Naruto shouted out, "Cage Bunshin!" There was a loud explosion as the girl was suddenly embedded in a wall. Her shadow clone took a step back to get a larger view of the irony before it laughed hysterically and poofed out of existence. Tsunade stood in front of her desk with her eyes closed and her arm fully extended. Blinking awake, Tsunade looked to see what she had just punched. She quickly recognized the object. Brat, I was busy, she said, pretending that she had been working the entire time. Naruto could only groan in response, the pain overwhelming her capacity for a scathing retort. After returning to her desk and wiping the drool from her mouth, Tsunade started to rifle through the day's missions. Good news, the fifth cheerfully, I have an important mission for you. C rank, Naruto asked hopefully as she suddenly seemed to recover to 100% health. It should be B ranked actually, the Hokage replied as she licked a finger before flipping through the mission request to double check. What is it? Naruto excitedly asked. Rescuing a princess, defeating a group of bandits, stealing secrets from a foreign country. None of those actually, Tsunade replied before snapping the folder shut and tossing it to the Neo girl. Naruto frantically pulled out the mission outline, almost ripping the front cover off the folder in the process. D rank. Babysitting. I don't know a thing about babysitting. You'll learn. Now get going, you're late already. Naruto had just entered the hallway when Shizune entered the Hokage's office. Wait. The black-haired woman shouted breathlessly before reaching down to pick up a dazed Neo girl by the collar of her orange jumpsuit. Tsunade looked curiously at her closest friend. Shizune. Shizune straightened up as her breathing slowed to a more sedate pace. Tsunade-sama. Shizune cheerfully greeted before her face shifted to a more determined look. Aren't you forgetting something? There was a perplexed look on the Hokage's face as she tried to recall what. No, I don't suppose so, she finally said while shaking her head. Ah, do you mind if I borrow Naruto-kun for a moment then? Shizune asked in a slightly pleading tone of voice. Knock yourself out, Tsunade carelessly commented. Naruto gave a yelp as she was suddenly yanked out of the room. Tsunade laid her head down to sleep some more. After all, the paperwork wasn't going anywhere. The fifth Hokage suddenly raised her head as a loud shout of, "No! I'm not wearing that. Girls wear that," echoed through the tower. And that was how Tsunade knew what she had forgotten. Damn it, Shizune. How could you? She angrily yelled as she sprung over her desk and hurried out of the room. Ah, you must be the babysitter that we hired. An exotic, gorgeous-looking red-eyed red-headed woman said as she opened the door. Naruto took a moment to rub at her eyes. For a second there, she thought she saw 9 flowing tails and a pair of fox ears. Well, come on. Don't keep us waiting, the woman said as she pulled the blonde girl inside. Dear, have you seen my tie? Asked a blonde-haired man. He looked really familiar. In fact, Naruto was wondering if the fourth Hokage had an identical twin. The man stopped pacing in front of the stairs to gaze at the shorter blonde. Who's she? She's our babysitter, honey, the redhead cheerfully answered. You're a bit late, girl, the man said as he shot the girl a neutral look. The fox-like woman playfully cuffed her husband. We're not in a hurry to be anywhere, you know. The fourth lookalike shook his head before turning. No, I suppose not, he mumbled as he walked away. Don't worry about him, he's just grumpy in the mornings, the foxy lady said with a wink before turning and walking toward a small room. Naruto quickly followed. The redhead led her to a crib in the nursery. This is who you will be watching over. Say hello to. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Naruto. Naruto hesitantly replied. Is that so? Our little one is also called Naruto too, how strange, the woman said with a thoughtful look. Well, let's see you hold him. With that, she picked up her child and carefully pushed him into the blonde girl's hands. He's so small, Naruto exclaimed. Shish, he's sleeping. And yes, well, babies are like that, the woman replied distractedly. And then, seemingly out of the blue, Naruto asked the fateful question. Where do babies come from? There was no reply since the red-haired woman had disappeared. However, before Naruto could find her employer, the baby's eyes snapped open. And little Naruto started to wail. Loudly. Shish, shish, Naruto whispered. The baby wouldn't stop, so she brought her head closer to nuzzle the child. The baby suddenly stopped crying, but, ow! Naruto cried as she struggled to pull her head away. Unfortunately, little Naruto had her hair in a death grip and he wasn't letting go anytime soon. Ow! Let go, she whined as the baby gave another tug on her short blonde locks. Resolving her determination, Naruto pulled as hard as she could. Little Naruto lost his grip and she was free, without losing a single strand of hair. But the baby would have none of that. He started to cry again. No, Naruto wanted to cry as well. Stealing her resolve, she brought her head closer. Two heads peered in to look at the now quiet baby and his quietly suffering babysitter. They disappeared moments later. She's great with the children, isn't she? A foxy woman said with a small smile. I'm surprised she hasn't started screaming yet, the blonde hair man helpfully supplied. The redhead hit her husband again for saying such bad things about their child before she gave him a small peck on the cheek. So where did you want to go today that made you so eager to find a babysitter? She teased. He had an enigmatic smirk on his face. Wouldn't you like to know? In the other room. Ah, you threw up on me. Oh gross, it stinks yo. An exhausted girl slowly staggered into the Hokage's office. Mission, success, the girl mumbled to the blonde woman behind the desk. Naruto. The shriek came from behind, but Naruto was too tired to turn around, much less argue with Shizune-chan. Nothing held the aspiring medic nin back though. I thought I told you to keep them clean. Naruto's hair and long-sleeved sweater were partially covered in some dried yellow substance. Thankfully, the vomit didn't reach the thigh-length skirt although, of the three, that would be the easiest to clean. Hey, serves you right my apprentice, Tsunade said with a smirk, cutting in before Shizune could start reprimanding the younger blonde. She pulled out a stack of papers and quickly browsed through them. It looks like there aren't any more D-rank missions available right now. I guess you get the day off then, brat. Naruto disappeared so quickly it almost seemed like she used a Junin technique. Ah, stupid baby, Naruto cried as she finally had enough of waiting. Ripping a thin pink ribbon from her hair, she dunked her head into the half-full sink. Gah, it stinks, she complained as the smell returned with the application of water. Groping around she finally found the metal chain and pulled the plug from the sink. That done, she made her way over to the shower, nearly tripping over the toilet along the way. Finding the knob that activated the water, she didn't bother to remove her clothes as she turned it to full and plunged right in. Moments later, she was shrieking and cursing angrily because she had forgotten to give the water time to heat up. Well, the vomit was finally out of her hair. Naruto shivered slightly. She could still feel the cold water. Her new sweater was soaking in the sink. A large ratty towel was covering her upper body as she quietly sat on the toilet seat and thought. Okay, babies are evil. I've got to stop them from taking over. But where did they come from? She wondered. Sakura-chan would know. She shouted as she jumped up and ran to her bedroom. Quickly donning an unwashed shirt, she quickly left her apartment, completely forgetting about the skirt that was attached around her waist. Naruto's first stop was Kakashi. She found him standing around in the middle of nowhere reading his orange book. Kakashi-sensei, she called out. Naruto. The silver-haired man asked without looking up. Have you seen Sakura-chan? Ma. Not today, he said as he continued to read. If I see her, I'll let her know that you're searching for her. Ah. Thank you Kakashi-sensei. There was a quiet moment. Naruto broke it soon enough. Kakashi-sensei. She shouted to get his attention. Kakashi asked as he continued to read. Do you know where babies come from? The girl curiously asked. Kakashi flipped a page and read some more before he replied. Ask someone else. Fine. The annoyed girl shouted. Right after she disappeared, one of Kakashi's hairs twinged outwards. His sole visible eye was now wide open and unseeing. Whether his shock stemmed from the passage that he had just read about Rika and Denshi or from finally realizing what Naruto had just asked, is unclear. The bell above the door rang as Naruto entered the flower shop. She spotted her target sitting behind the cash register. Ino-chan. The girl in question looked up from her manga. Who are you? She asked, wondering why this person was addressing her so familiarly. I'm Naruto. Naruto. She questioned. She slowly scanned her eyes up and down the blonde in front of her before blinking twice and asking, Are you feeling okay? Yep. Naruto cheerfully answered. Oh, well, okay, Ino said hesitantly. So, have you seen Sakura-chan today? Naruto asked as she walked behind the counter. Ha! Ino barked, her reservations forgotten as Naruto reminded her of the existence of her rival. I haven't seen any signs of that large forehead today. The ex-Kyuubi cantainer's face fell. Oh, okay, thanks anyway. Anytime, the other blonde replied as she looked back down at her novel. Ah, Ino-chan, are you here to chat or buy a flower? The other blonde girl asked impatiently. Naruto wasn't given time to answer as the bell above the door rang again, signaling the entry of more customers. Ino stood up. Out, Ino whispered as she pushed the other girl out of the way so that she could help the newcomers. The bell chimed a third time as Naruto left without a word. At a training area in the middle of nowhere, Naruto arrived to see Lee hard at work demolishing another log. She paused as realization dawned on her. Fuzzy Brows might know where Sakura-chan is. Oi, Fuzzy Brows. Naruto called. Naruto. Lee shouted as he turned around. He stopped and stared at the one in front of him, his mouth flapping up and down like a fish. But before Naruto could ask a question, Lee had his own thing to say. Awoa. Naruto is at the pinnacle of youth. For a man to wear a skirt with such pride. Bap. Naruto. Why did you hit me for complimenting you? Lee asked while rubbing the back of his head. You called it a compliment? Naruto shouted, red-faced as she tried to cover the skirt with her hands. My mistake Naruto. I shall prove how sorry I am by kicking this log 100 times. He began doing just that. And if that's not enough, I shall run 100 laps around Konoha. He shouted in between kicks. And if that isn't enough, I shall. Have you seen Sakura-chan Fuzzy Brows? Naruto impatiently interrupted. I am sorry, Naruto-san, but I have not seen the lovely Sakura today, Lee said between kicks. Oh, she was a little disappointed. But maybe Fuzzy Brows would know. Well, do you have any idea where babies come from? I don't. Lee replied without hesitation as he stopped kicking the log for a moment to devote his full attention to Naruto. Before Naruto's face could fall any further, Lee continued, but I have heard that the stork brings babies to married couples when they are ready. Really? Lee frowned. I do not believe so. Instead, I believe that babies grow from trees. It sounded so absurd. What? Why? Naruto demanded. Our lovely Sakura must have come from a cherry tree because they are almost as beautiful as she. Naruto gasped. It made so much sense. Whoa, you're so smart, Lee, she shouted, completely forgetting about her skirt as she pumped a fist into the air. No, Naruto, I am not smart at all, Lee admitted, embarrassed. You are. The blonde insisted, stamping her foot. There was no reply since Lee was looking away to hide his embarrassment. You are, she repeated. She pointed at the boy with the bowl cut. Admit it, yo. As Naruto continued get Lee to accept her praise, they were unaware that a third person was standing just outside of the training area. Shanaru, do you see her hair? It looks so smooth, soft and shiny. And her large innocent eyes. And her forehead isn't large. She's definitely cuter than you. Shut up, you. Sakura shouted angrily at her inner persona. Naruto and Lee froze before swiftly turning towards where the shout came from. Wide smiles instantly graced their faces when they realized who was responsible for the loud shout. Ah, Sakura-chan. Why are you here? Naruto shouted as she energetically beckoned for the pink-haired girl to come over. I heard you were looking for me, the pink-haired girl said as she cautiously approached the two. Naruto looked confused for a moment. I was. She froze for a moment to think. She suddenly had a hand behind her head and rubbed it nervously. That's right, I was. Ha ha ha. Well, the Haruno impatiently asked. Naruto blinked. Why were you looking for me? Sakura asked. Ah, do you know where babies come from, Sakura-chan? Of course I do, Sakura said confidently. Naruto cheered. Yeah, Sakura-chan is so smart. As expected of my beautiful flower, Lee seconded. Sakura glared at the boy in green spandex. Get lost, Lee. Awoa, the green hair boy cried as he began kicking the log again. I shall prove the depths of my love for the lovely Sakura with 1,000 kicks to this log. And if that isn't enough. The two girls' sweat dropped before they turned to each other. Okay, Naruto. I'll make it simple for you, Sakura began. And stopped. Moments later, the pink-haired girl was frowning. Explaining this was going to be harder than she thought. She finally looked up and saw Naruto's expectant expression. Not wanting to appear stupid to the class clown, she blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Only girls can have babies. Naruto looked confused for a brief moment. Her dazed expression quickly changed to a wide smile. Good thing I'm not a girl then. Such a brilliant smile. It looks cute on her, inner Sakura huffed. Hush, outer Sakura shouted. Aren't you a girl right now? Sakura asked. Naruto gaped at Sakura's accusation before she composed herself and tried to puzzle out the truth. Shanaru. Her confused look is so innocent. Inner Sakura shouted. I said be quiet. Outer Sakura ordered before she tried to shove her inner persona into a small locked box. I guess so. Naruto finally replied, a hesitant look on her face. Her insecure look is perfect. Inner Sakura said as she suddenly broke out of Outer Sakura's hold and pointed. Outer Sakura looked pensive. It is, isn't it? I mean, that means you can have babies. Sakura pointed out. No way. The blonde girl sputtered. Inner Sakura was suspiciously silent about the scared look on the other girl's face. Outer Sakura wasn't. I'm beginning to hate her, and yet I feel like I want to hug and comfort her right now. How would Sasuke-kun feel if he saw her? Inner Sakura curiously wondered. He would ignore her. Outer Sakura confidently answered. Would he really? Her inner self asked innocently. A tick mark appeared on her forehead. And when you have a baby, you'll get really fat. Fat? Why is this Sakura? Lee asked in confusion. Apparently he had paused his training again to listen to Sakura's genius explanation about the facts of life. His comment broke the mood since the terror suddenly disappeared from the blonde girl's face upon hearing such an important question. Confusion broke out on Naruto's face as well. So, Shanaru, There it is again. That innocent look. And she doesn't have to worry about her weight. She doesn't. Haven't you seen how much ramen she eats? Quote exclamation mark. That. Are you okay, Sakura-chan? The blonde asked worriedly. Inner Sakura immediately flinched away when she saw that look. Cha, you can't beat her. Get rid of her now before Sasuke-kun finds her. She moaned. Where would I hide the body? The pink-haired one muttered through gritted teeth. Huh? Naruto asked, as she examined Sakura's face from 3 centimeters away. Sakura stumbled backwards before a fake grin appeared on her face. Oh, I meant to say I feel great. Oh, okay. The blonde cheerfully said, glad that Sakura was feeling healthy. Lee was nodding happily as well. Neither noticed the strained tones lacing the cherry blossom's voice. Now where were we? Sakura wondered. You were saying something about getting fat. Naruto said with a thoughtful expression. A sinister grin appeared on Sakura's face, causing both Lee and Naruto to leap back in terror. Shanaru, take her down. Inner Sakura shouted from within. Well, some girls get really fat. She paused for a moment before adding, as big as that caterpillar in the forest of death actually. They're so big that they have to roll to move around, she vividly described. Rivulets of sweat started to pour down the Naruto's face as she imagined this. Sakura-chan, stop. And then when it comes time for the baby to come into this world, the doctors take these gigantic steak knives. She paused to hold her arms out real wide, and she put one hand above the other to emphasize that the knives were so big that they needed 2 hands to properly hold and use them. Bringing both hands above her head, she breathed deeply, heightening the suspense. And then she stabbed downward in a brutal manner. Ayya! No more! No more! Naruto shrieked as she shut her eyes, covered her ears, and huddled close to the ground. For his part, Lee was confused since he didn't see what the problem was. He stepped forward and gently tapped the blonde girl on the shoulder. Naruto-san. Oof. He fell back slightly when Naruto scratched at his chest several times before latching onto him in fear. Sakura stared at the scene for a moment before a giant grin appeared on her face. This is just too perfect. Outer Sakura cheered. Hell yeah. Inner Sakura shouted, echoing her carrier's thoughts. We win. Sasuke is still ours. Naruto, don't worry. Sakura gently chided. Naruto looked up hopefully, ready to hear the good news. As long as you don't hug a boy, you won't have to worry about carrying a ba. Oh. She held a hand to her mouth. The pause caused the happy expression to drop like a rock. When Sakura failed to move or correct herself, the two turned their heads to see what she was staring so intently at. Horror dawned in their faces as the two suddenly realized just what Naruto was doing. The blonde quickly pushed herself away, but I suppose I was a bit too late. If it's a girl, name her Sakura, will you? Sakura requested as she covered her mouth to hide her laughter. No. Fuzzy brows, you idiot. Naruto shouted as tears entered her eyes. She leapt at the boy wearing green spandex and tried to beat him to death for giving her a baby. Very sorry, Naruto-san. I shall make it up to you, Lee exclaimed as he easily dodged out of the way. Dash. Omake. Two people appear from out of nowhere. It was the red-haired woman and the blonde man from earlier in the chapter. The redhead gives a cough before she began. We just wanted to let the readers know that any assumptions that you had about us were false. First of all, I am not Kyuubi, I am an ordinary redhead woman. Yes, just average. And I'm not the fourth. That means that I have not been mysteriously brought back to life, nor am I hiding from anyone, the blonde man helpfully supplied. A third figure appears. And if you believe what either of them said, man, you're ghouly. Kitsune bai. Ga. See. The co-author shouts as she leaps out of the way of the foxfire before dashing for the exit. She didn't get very far. Dear, where do you want this? The blonde-haired man said as he slowly walked back to his wife. I was thinking of showing her around the country of rain. No, I hate wet places. The co-author shouted as she struggled to escape. The blonde man didn't appear to notice. Instead, he just looked thoughtful. But first, we need a babysitter, right? Yes, I suppose we do. Back in her apartment, Naruto suddenly let out a sneeze. After groggily scratching her back, she turned over and fell back asleep. Author's Corner. I can't believe you sacrificed me, your best friend. It was either you or me. There was a brief moment of silence. Hey, what's that for? Don't forget, I made sure that you weren't hurt. Stay back. I'm warning you. Hey, you're still here. The theme of this chapter was babies. You do realize you look like an idiot when you talk to thin air like that, right? Hey. Gah. Naruto let out a great big yawn as she stepped into the Hokage's office, catching the attention of two that were already inside. Naruto-kun, Shizune asked as she stepped up to check the younger girl's temperature. Tun remained in Tsunade's apprentice's other hand, bowing worriedly in the small girl's face. Naruto reached forward to absently pet Tsunade's pet pig. You look terrible, brat, Tsunade pointed out with a touch of concern. Indeed, there were dark rings around the girl's eyes. Ever since Sakura had explained where babies had come from, the nightmares had been far too horrifying to sleep through. That one where the babies were devouring every ramen bowl in sight, and she was tied up and unable to do anything, that one had her raiding her private stores when she finally woke up. Thankfully, there was that last cup of that extra special ramen that always made her happy. She couldn't stop shaking though, and she ended up spilling it just when it was ready. Naruto started to tremble again as her thoughts took a turn for the worst. Slap. Quickly recovering her senses, Naruto muttered a small thank you to Tsunade's apprentice before she took a deep breath and stepped forward. Tsunade frowned at the younger blonde before she looked through the available missions. She finally found one which the X-container could accomplish without too much trouble. This will be your only mission for today then. I hope you get some sleep before you come in tomorrow, the Sennin said as she held out a scroll. Naruto took the offered scroll without complaint and pulled it open. A tired look of surprise dawned on her face. Gaara is visiting today, she asked without looking up. Yes, with his sister and his brother. They are part of Suna's plan to rebuild relations between the two villages, and I need you to find housing and entertain the guests until I'm ready to receive them. She couldn't help it. She might have been tired, but Tsunade Bachan had left an opening a mile wide. So she scoffed. Sounds like you were planning on running away from your duties as Hokage to find a gambling parlor today, huh, Tsunade Baba? She asked, fully taking advantage of the Hokage's promise of no more D-rank missions today. Quote. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at the pint-sized blonde before an evil smile appeared on her face. Naruto shivered as an icy chill slowly crawled up her spine. Just for that brat, you're wearing that, Tsunade ordered as she pointed to a nearby wall. Quote. Naruto stared speechlessly at the newest set of clothes that were hanging from a wooden peg that was sticking out of the wall. What the hell are you on, you old hag? Shizune and Tun both sighed and walked out before the inevitable sounds of combat shook the Hokage's office. This is the spot. Who did the Hokage say was going to meet us here? Temari asked Kankuro as she stopped next to park near the Hokage's tower. The three watched the passerbys for some time before they noticed a strangely dressed, diminutive blonde girl leave the tower. For starters, her dress was a resized version of blue uniform worn by the nin assigned to patrol the streets of Konoha after the Uchiha police force ceased to exist. They watched as the girl spotted them after looking around for a moment. Giving a lazy wave, she walked over. Hey Gaara, Kankuro, Temari, Naruto said with a sleepy smile once she was within speaking distance. Why do you address us so familiarly? Gaara stoically asked. Naruto looked downcast for a moment before she realized that they hadn't forgotten her. They just didn't recognize her. It's me Uzumaki Naruto, she said with a big grin. Fishcake. Who names their kid Fishcake? Kankuro asked. No one replied. Naruto just wanted to cry. To be forgotten so easily. I'm just joking. Of course we know who you are, Kankuro suddenly said, but why are you wearing that? He was pointing at what the other two Sand siblings were already studying. The pair of large ears resting atop the girl's head. The black oversized paws covering her hands and feet and the long bushy red tail dragging behind her gave them a pretty good idea of what she was supposed to be. They weren't completely sure though, because this girl also had dark rings around her eyes. In addition, it seemed to clash with the blue patrolman uniform mentioned earlier. You're supposed to be a fox, right? Tamari guessed. That's right, Naruto weakly chuckled as she held a hand behind her head. You look pathetic, Tamari said, looking away to hide the blush on her face. She wanted a costume like that. The laughter died from her face, to be replaced by a cute pout. It's not like I wanted to wear it, the shorter blonde complained before she swiftly rounded on Kankuro. Stop gawking, she snapped. The boy in war paint quickly looked away. But the feeling of being watched persisted. There was only one other that was close enough to have such strong staring intent, and it wasn't Tamari. Naruto rounded on Gaara, and opened her mouth wide as she prepared to tell him to stop staring at her. Except she couldn't. Not when the emotionless way he was staring at her sent such bad vibes down her spine. Hey, what's with the scary face, yo? Naruto. Gaara started, fixing her in place with a look. He placed a medium-sized hand on the blonde's small shoulder. I want you, the redhead said with a completely expressionless face. Question marks flew over her head. Gaara had said it with such neutrality that she wasn't sure she heard right. Shriek. The three turned to stare at Kankuro. It wasn't me, he quickly stammered before pointing at Karasu. Skeptical looks appeared on everyone's face but Gaara's. The stoic look on his face never changed, although there was a slight twitch in the corner of his eye. Everyone slowly turned back to the red-haired boy, dreading what he was going to say next. Make my babies, Gaara added, again without any change in tone or expression. Again Naruto didn't understand what Gaara had just asked. Oh my god. And yet again, one of the Sand siblings assumed the worst. When they turned to glare at him this time, Kankuro soundlessly flapped his mouth for a moment before pointing at his puppet again and turning away. Before Gaara could crush his older brother for acting like a buffoon, Naruto spoke up. I can't make babies. She set a finger at the corner of her mouth as she looked skyward. She was trying and failing to figure out how it was done. Kankuro gave a small prayer of thanks to whoever was watching out for him at this time before joining the others in gawking at the shorter blonde girl. Was she really that naive? At their confused look, the blonde girl bent down and started to pile dirt from the ground. After a couple minutes, what came out was a passable dirt replica of the baby she held yesterday. See, she commented as she continued shaping the earth. I tried but it's not evil and it doesn't squirm when you hold. It suddenly got dark. Naruto looked up to see what was blocking sun. Tamari. You look mad. The girl commented, pointing out the obvious. Wah, she suddenly cried as she was lifted into the air by her collar. Listen up, Blondie, that's not how you make babies. The blonde with the 4 ponytails angrily said as she hauled the shorter girl over to a convenient corner that was just out of boys' listening range. Really? Naruto finally had a chance to ask when Tamari let her go. Dusting the dirt off of her clothes, she stood up and looked curiously at the blonde girl from Suna. How do you make babies then? Some distance away, the two boys watched as Tamari said something to the shorter blonde. The girl in uniform suddenly stiffened and a horrified look appeared on her face. When Tamari rapped on the other girl's head to see if she was still listening, the naive blonde let out a short shriek and dropped like a rock. Tamari dragged their tour guide back a moment later with a look of disgust. When the two looked down at the poor insensate girl, she was dead to the world and foaming at the mouth. Gaara and Kankuro looked back up at their sister, silently prodding her for what she had said to the fox girl. I only said, When a man marries a woman. She locked up right there. The weakling, Tamari said as she gave the girl beneath her a light kick. Gaara had a thoughtful look on his face. Mary. Seeing how their tour guide was still out of it and they didn't have any water on hand. Gaara concentrated on the prone girl. The other two looked on in confusion only to leap back in surprise as a large wave of sand flew from the gourd on his back and buried their guide. Moments later, the mound of sand ejected a coughing body. Naruto gagged a few more times before she turned to glare at Gaara. Did you have to do that? She growled. Yes, the sand shinobi replied in a brutally honest manner. That brought her up short. Oh, well, Kankuro suddenly found himself covered by sand. He barely had time to let out a yelp. The other two girls stared at Gaara in shock. Marry me, the container for the Ikibi deadpanned. Quote. It was silent for the longest of moments. A stray wind blew past the three. And then muffled moans started coming from the sand cocoon. I'm not marrying a guy, yo. Naruto finally shrieked. Before any of the others could react, the former Kyuubi container was off of the large pile of sand, 20 meters away, and making good on her escape. Discover more. Manga subscriptions. Fan fiction. Books. Gaara smiled a feral grin and a sled of sand formed right under him. He immediately shot through the crowded streets. It wouldn't be long before he caught up. Especially because Naruto had to push her way through the rabble while Gaara just plowed through those who didn't leap aside in time. It took several moments' time before Tamari recovered from the shock of seeing her brother making an official Suna marriage proposal. She immediately ran after the two. She didn't care what happened to the other blonde, but she didn't want to lose her chance at sleeping in a real bed after days of camping in nature. When the sand finally fell away from him, Kankuro let out a deep gasp before he looked around. Bro, sis. Where'd everyone go? There was no reply. A lone pedestrian with a bushy tail and a pair of large ears on the top of her head stood in the middle of nowhere with absolutely no one else around. In short, she stuck out like a sore thumb and had absolutely zero chance of hiding from her pursuers. So when a maniacally grinning red-headed boy shot past on a sled without a second look, soon followed by a blonde girl with a large fan on her back, something had to be wrong. Naruto waited by the street lamp for a moment longer before she pulled off the fake mustache. Excuse me, miss, came a voice from the left one. Startled, Naruto threw out her arm in that direction only for it to be caught and held with a meaty thwack. Naruto warily turned to see what was holding her arm in place. Tamari had a strained smile on her face as she held the thin arm in a solid grip. Have you seen a short? She started to ask before she trailed off as she saw the other girl's face. You. The taller blonde shouted as she thrust the smaller girl away. Yeah, Naruto cried as she stumbled away. Turning to run, she suddenly found herself lying face first in the concrete with a giant unopened battle fan resting on her head. Pushing herself off of the ground to yell at the Suna Kunoichi, she found herself in yet another headlock. Why was everyone putting her in a headlock these days? Listen, girlie, I don't care how scary my brother is right now. I've been on the road for 3 days now and I would like nothing more than to have a nice soft bed. Naruto wasn't listening. Instead, she was crying as something else made itself known. Your armpits stink, she cried as she tried to cover her nose. She obviously couldn't see the frown from her position, but when Tamari squeezed down on her neck she knew that she had upset the older blonde in some way. Gah, she cried before the pressure eased up slightly. You are going to take me to a public bath then? Tamari coldly said before pressing down once again. Okay. Naruto cried as she struggled to break free. This is the bathhouse? Tamari asked as she stepped out from the changing room with a large towel around her to hide her assets. She gazed at the large steaming pools filled with women happily chatting away about the day's happening. This was incredible. The bathhouses at Suna were far less extravagant due to the restrictions on water use, and she had been too busy training for the Chuan exams to try this out before. She immediately made her way for the nearest pool. Yup. Naruto tiredly replied to thin air as she came out as well, wrapped in a towel that was far too large for her. Maybe a nice dip in the hot springs would make it easier for her to sleep tonight. She suddenly noticed how quiet it had become. A bucket fell to the ground. Hey, what's with the weird looks, yo? She asked curiously as she looked up. The pervert is trying to get in again. Someone shouted. Get him. Someone else suddenly shouted. Naruto turned to run. Right outside, Jiraiya watched as the angry women dog-piled his student. That wouldn't have been so bad if the brat didn't have a mouth that was worse than a sailor's when she was hopping mad. Unfortunately, there were women and children nearby, and the number of people after her blood doubled in a quarter of a minute. Discover more. Story writing software. Beta reading service. Gaming merchandise. Oh ho. Good job, Gaki. This is excellent research material, he said as he furiously drew like his life depended on it. However, after pausing to look up from his notebook to peek through his spyglass once again, he saw something better than a young girl beating back the wolves with a wet towel and a string of profanity. Whoa, check out that blonde, he crowed victoriously. There was no need to worry about volume, the brat had that covered nicely. Well built, good proportions, exotic looks, he continued listing the girl's good features. Now should I keep the 4 ponytails or go with the single one from that babe that's right next to her? Jiraiya said as he tapped the pen against his chin. I'll keep the 4 ponytails, since it's such a rare style it'll accentuate her exotic beauty. This is perfect, he said as he put the finishing touches on his newest drawing. What are you doing? A monotone voice asked from behind him. Jiraiya turned, surprised that he was so engrossed in his research that he had let someone sneak up on him. Nothing, brat, you're too young, the Toad Senin said as he fumbled to hide his notebook. Which became rather hard to accomplish because the book wasn't in his hands anymore. Gaara accepted the small notebook from a pile of sand. He flipped through the first few pages without any ounce of emotion. Jiraiya was shocked to see someone could look upon such beauties with such seriousness. Could it be this boy? You draw all right, the redhead finally said as he held the notebook out to return it. It must have been their height difference, or maybe Jiraiya's excitement over having his notebook back, but the notebook never changed hands. Instead it fell to the ground and opened to the last page that Jiraiya had drawn in. Gaara stared at the open notebook for the longest of moments. Ah, my best work yet, Jiraiya proudly proclaimed when he saw Gaara's impassive face finally twitch. So the brat did have women that he liked. At least, that was what Jiraiya was thinking before the notebook was promptly buried by a mound of sand. There was the sound of muffled tearing underneath. He was outraged. This wasn't his life's work since he had filled several such notepads over the years with quality art, but to see his work treated so carelessly like that. Brat, do you know how long it took me to collect those? Gaara just stared at the man. That was my sister. As he said this, a killing aura suddenly formed around him. A cloud of notebook fragments flew into the air as his sand ejected what was left of the notebook before swirling malevolently around the gourd carrier. Jiraiya's anger quickly turned to fear. Now, let's not be hasty, boy, he said as he prepared to leap away. Die, Gaara calmly said as he formed a series of hand seals. Quicksand in the style of a waterfall. Sand immediately bubbled from beneath the earth as the gourd on his back disappeared. Soon, a giant tidal wave of sand suddenly rose up from behind the youngest of the sand trio. There was absolutely no leaping away from this, and moments later Jiraiya was swept away. Next thing the women know, the wooden wall shielding them from public view collapsed when a large wave of sand proved too much for it to hold off. The first thing on Temari's mind as she was pulled from the hot spring and swept away, demon container or not, she was going to kill her little brother after this. The second thing that went through her mind was that this wasn't going to help diplomatic relations much when the Hokage discovered just how the bathhouse was demolished. The screaming finally stopped as the sand stopped flowing from out of nowhere and the women weren't jostled around like twigs in a wind. But when they dug themselves out, they were in for a horrible surprise. It's the other pervert. To the fortune of Sunagaker, this was a perfectly acceptable scapegoat. The 50-year-old was sitting in the middle of what was left of the bathhouse as he dumbly gawked at all the women covered with only sand. "Get him!" someone shouted, and the mob immediately gathered around the old man as they prepared to do unspeakable things to the pervert. Finally forgotten, a bruised and dirtied Naruto found herself slowly drifting away from the bathhouse atop a bed of sand. For once, she added 2 and 2 and obtained 4. To sum up, this was Gaara's doing, and if she reached him she was going to die. In other words, her math was still a little off. 2. It wasn't her fault though, she was still missing some important pieces of information. In order to avoid dying before she could visit Ichiraku's for dinner, she leapt off of the solid platform and climbed her way over the sand dunes toward freedom. Well, she tried, but the sand was soft, and her feet continued to sink in. She didn't think anything of it until her foot finally sank in and wouldn't come out. The same fate met with her other foot, and she soon tried everything she could to continue moving. How stupid could she be? She finally asked as she smacked her forehead with a sandy palm. Sand was Gaara's medium. Of course he had the advantage here. But she hadn't come to those last 2 conclusions yet because she had something else to occupy her. What a stupid move. Smacking my forehead with sand-covered hands, she moaned as she tried to rub the grit out of her crystal-clear sky blues with arms covered with sand. If anything, she was making it worse. She was finally able to make some headway toward being able to see again after clapping her hands several times to get rid of some of the grit before rubbing at her eyes again. And when she could finally see again, she spotted a small mound of sand growing right in front of her. Soon, a dead animal broke out of the mound of sand. The fact that it had sand cascading down red fur didn't bother her one bit. But the dead animal continued to rise out of the ground, and when it turned out to be connected to a head. No! Naruto screamed loudly as she started clawing desperately at the soft sand as Gaara started appearing before her. Once his feet cleared the mound of sand, he took a step forward. Naruto, finally realizing the futility of escape, curled inwards and screamed as Gaara approached. He finally stopped in front of her. Laugh. Gaara slowly said. No, wah? Naruto asked, wondering if she had heard wrong. Laugh. Gaara repeated. You were joking. Why didn't you say so earlier? The girl demanded as all traces of her fear evaporated. Gaara remained silent. So why were you here again? Naruto asked, her blue eyes showing her confusion. Lead us to our hotel, came a tired voice from behind them. It was Temari wading tiredly through the sand with a bundle in her hands. What's this? Naruto asked as said bundle was shoved into her hands. Temari looked at her oddly. You do realize you're not wearing anything right now. Given her current dress state, it was very easy to see Naruto's entire body turn red as she suddenly hugged the bundle to her chest and disappeared around a convenient corner. How about this hotel? Naruto tiredly asked. This wasn't the 50th one that she was showing them. It was the first, but for some inexplicable reason, the uniform that she was wearing made her feel sleepy. We'll take it, Gaara said without fanfare. That quickly? She asked, the surprise evident on her face. Yes. Gaara and Temari both replied. It took little time for Naruto to secure a room using the Hokage's voucher. Taking the keys from the man at the counter, she took them upstairs to show them to their room. Once inside their hotel room, Temari stormed into the bathroom and shut the door. The shower could be heard running a few minutes later. Naruto watched her go before she turned back to Gaara. You have to put more energy into your voice. I never knew you were joking about the marriage until you told me Dadbeo. Who said I was joking? Gaara asked in a perfectly calm voice. Naruto reared back as if struck. Naruto was suddenly aware that a layer of sand was forming over her feet again. I want you, the red-haired boy said without an ounce of emotion. The room's front door suddenly slammed shut. Kankuro leapt back when shards of glass began landing all around him. Soon after, something larger nearly came down on top of him. Blonde, short hair, odd fox clothing, and rings around her eyes. He immediately recognized the girl crouching in front of him. Hey, wait, he shouted. He wanted to know where she took his older sister and younger brother. The girl took one look at him before her eyes widened and she ran off screaming. The red pin-on tail on her bottom flailing wildly behind her as if reading her panic. Kankuro watched her go before he looked up and gazed at the broken window on the third floor. Looking down again, he saw the word, hotel, on a sign in front of the building. He walked in without a second thought. The bathroom door opened slightly, allowing Tamari to peek into the room. I heard the window shatter, she said before she curiously turned to see what Gaara was staring at. Shaking her head, she re-entered the bathroom. That was not funny, Gaara commented as he stared at the hole in the window that Naruto had leapt from. Omake. Ichi. You almost got me into trouble today, Karasu. Kankuro said as he carefully cleaned out the puppet's arm. You were just as surprised as I was, the puppet shot back. Don't talk back to me. The puppet-wielding ninja ordered as he shook the wooden arm at the rest of the puppet. Omake. Ni. Call. Tsunade demanded. Full house. Her opponent shouted as he set down 5 cards involving 3 kings and a pair of aces. Royal flush. Tsunade countered as she threw down her own hand. Half the crowd suddenly collapsed while clutching their chest. Instead of joyously reveling in her victory, Tsunade was staring worriedly at the front door. Perhaps it was time to return to the Hokage's tower to see what bad thing was happening while she was away.